Influential listening came to me because over the years as a corporate coach and a presentation skills trainer and a corporate communications expert and all the rest of that stuff, I started teaching listening skills to people, which is kind of surprising when you think about it, because we have two ears and one mouth, but you'd never know it the way we behave, right? That our mouth is often more open than our ears when we're listening. And what had occurred to me was that when we listen to people, how we listen to people makes a difference as to how people respond to us. So then it occurred to me, my goodness, then listening isn't passive at all, it's really quite active. Because if I can influence how you respond to me, not what you say, but a sense of safety or a sense of trust or a sense of enthusiasm or a sense of whatever, how I listen to you may make a difference as to how you respond to me. Felix Adler said something about listening without quite saying it that way, and he said, the conception of worth that each person is an end per se is not a mere abstraction. Our interest in it is not merely academic. Every outcry against the oppression of some people by other people, or against what is morally hideous, is the affirmation of the principle that a human being as such is not to be violated. A human being is not to be handled as a tool, but is to be respected and revered. And listening is a way to respect and revere the other. So a couple of points for today's little conversation. One is that the way you listen impacts the way others respond to you. 2, it's hard work. 3, listening is the key to mutual understanding, and in my language, is a gift we can give to others every day of the week. So I want you to think for a minute, without saying anything, how many people in your life can you count on one hand that are good listeners, whatever that means to you? I'll prime the pump a little bit. It's somebody perhaps who doesn't interrupt. It's somebody perhaps who doesn't judge. It's somebody perhaps who just quietly sits and gives you the sense that you have all the time in the world to say whatever you need to say. It's somebody who you can call on and not feel like you're imposing. It's somebody who'll be honest with you and say, I can't listen to you now, but I will later. And they do. How many people have you got on your right hand or left that you can count? And when you think of those people, what does it feel like to you? Does it feel like a gift? When was the last time somebody called you on the telephone and said, hey, how are you, without an agenda? Just for the hell of it, just to say, how are you, as compared to, how are you, listen quickly, and then talk about what they were calling about. I will tell you personally, I have lots on that list. How many do you have? And would you like to be the one that calls somebody just for the hell of it and listen? What kind of gift would that be? Whatever holiday you celebrate, whether it's a birthday or any other holiday, imagine giving gifts like that don't cost too much, but they take work. They take work. So let me tell you a story or two. Listen in on this conversation. Did you hear me? Yeah, I heard you. But she didn't move. She didn't do what you wanted her to do. She heard you, but she didn't listen. Here's another one. You get to bed finally after a very late evening at about 1:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden outside your window, open in this weather, whatever, you hear this jackhammer outside going, trying to get to sleep, and you're just falling asleep. And what do you say to yourself? You say a couple of expletives deleted, right? And then you say, what the heck are they doing, and why are they doing this? It's 1:30, I got to get to sleep. You look look out the window, you see somebody working, you say, oh, now I'm awake. Go to the refrigerator, maybe eat something, maybe go through a piece of mail, because now you can't get back to sleep. And then you finally get into bed and you growl. Grrr. The guy across the street is listening to the same sound. Right? And he, same time, wakes up, and what does he do? He's thrilled. He's thrilled to death. Why? Because he's the commissioner of roads and highways, and thank God somebody's working, and somebody's doing their job. All right? So that's kind of an interesting story, right? What's that all about? And then the last story is a personal story. The other two I made up. Is about me and my therapist. Going public now. I was in therapy at a certain point in time in my life where we'll call him Harry. Every time I went to Harry, I used to feel a little anxious and nervous. And you say, well, you go to therapy, you would be anxious and nervous, but that wasn't really the case. I couldn't figure out why, because he was a pretty smart guy, and yet I used to feel kind of antsy and nervous and, kind of hurry up. And I suddenly noticed that when I was in his office and he'd sit in his big, shiny green leather chair, and I sat on the couch, he would always nod his head. So I'd be talking, and he'd go, And it got to be really an awareness in me. And after about a year, I finally said to him, because I was working on being more assertive and asking for what I want, because I'm so good at giving everybody else what they want, I'm learning on how to say it for myself, so I muster up all my strength and I say to him, Harry, I notice that when I speak to you, you nod your head a lot. Could I ask you to just see if you could just stop doing that? That was a big risk, right? I mean, it's really, for me, it was like a big risk. And he said, gee, I didn't realize that I did that. So sure, I'll do that. So he put his hand on his elbow on the arm of the chair, like this, and put his chin in his cupped hand, and held for dear life, because his head was still wanting to move, right? And his fingers turned white. I mean, he was really gripping his chin. And I kind of sort of felt it badly for him. But what was amazing is the room changed for me, because he was sitting still. And it felt like he was really present. And it made all the difference in the world for those magical moments. Now, later on, he still nodded his head a little bit and whatever, but he became aware that it got in the way of really good communication. Now, many of us will nod our heads in agreement. Women have a tendency to do that. Women will nod their head saying, I gotcha. Doesn't mean we agree with you when we say that, by the way. It says, I gotcha. But sometimes it can get in the way. I remember doing a training once where somebody in the back of the room, didn't move at all, and I figured, oh, she doesn't like what I'm saying, and she's not learning anything, and she's going to think I'm terrible. And she came back and she said, no, I was keeping my head still because I'm a head nodder, and I was afraid to nod my head when you were speaking, so I wanted to practice it. So, what do these three stories have in common? They have in common a couple of things, not the least of which is the difference between hearing and listening. Right? You think there's a difference between hearing and listening, right? Well, my definition is hearing is for sound and listening is for meaning. So when a teenager says, yeah, I heard you, that's true. I heard you. That doesn't mean I'm listening or obeying. I just heard the noise. Like the rat-a-tat-tat is its own self noise, right? Some sort of sound. And each of those two people, you and the guy who's the Department of Roads Commissioner, hears the sound differently and makes meaning to it differently, right? I mean, that's what happens. So one person, you know that, one person can say one thing and different people listen to it differently, or some people just hear it and that goes in one ear and out the other. So I want to make the distinction between hearing and listening. And then I want to talk a little bit about how listening can make a difference. And then I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of listening. Some of us may be aware of language like active listening. I never understood what that meant, quite frankly. But what I'm going to do is talk to you about different kinds of listening. Because for different circumstances, we listen to people differently. So we'll talk about, or I'll talk about that, and I'm happy to open it up for conversation as well. So here's the situation. When you think about who's a good listener in your life, and you realize that maybe you have one that doesn't interrupt, and one that is there for you, you start thinking about the things that influence our listening. So I want to give you some statistics, real things that happen to human beings. We can speak out of our mouth at a rate of 125 to 250 words per minute. Remember that Crazy Eddie commercial? Remember that guy where he talked like there's a mile a minute? You know, okay? So you can do that, but believe it or not, as fast as he was able to speak, we can listen faster. Okay, we have the capacity for listening faster than how people speak. Now, what do you think that means, all right, when you are listening and you've already, got it, right? You already checked out. You're already somewhere else. You're not staying with that person because you listen so quickly and it's like you check out. But listening doesn't just mean listening to words, because 85% of communication is nonverbal. So, for example, when I was a kid, I'm going to have to act this out a little bit, can't help it not. When I was a kid, I had done a study on fire. When you're in third grade, you study these things. We were studying fire. So I put a fire manila folder together. It was really neat because we were taught to put colored crayons on the manila folder, different colors, and then we put black tempera paint over the colors, and then we could take a toothpick or something and scratch off the black stuff, and this fabulous color would come up from behind the black stuff. Everybody got a picture? It was really fun, and it was my fire book. So I came home really thrilled to show my mom my fire book. And I'm coming in and ready to show her, and my mother is standing in the kitchen like this. I said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said. Did I believe her words or her nonverbal behavior? Huh? What did I believe? So do you think I showed her the book then? Right, because I was listening to what? Not the words, but the behavior spoke volumes beyond the word nothing. So when we listen to others, it's probably good to pay attention to all of it. And if we pay attention to all of it, then the words are there and all the other stuff that comes to us. Now, the things that influence us, aside from those statistics, is that there are obstacles to listening. There are what I call internal obstacles and external obstacles. So the internal obstacles are what I call that cranial woodpecker in your head. Anybody know about what the cranial woodpecker is? Okay, so I'm going to give you an experience of a cranial woodpecker. If you don't mind, you willing to play a little with me? All right, so I'm going to ask you all to just, for a moment, please, close your eyes and listen to the sounds only in this room. Only in this room. Not outside, only in this room. And the only way you can do it is kind of shut everything down and just listen to what you can hear only in this room. Now, in the same state, take your listening outside and hear what you can hear, or listen to what you can listen to outside this room. Might be a slight car moving by or whatever. Pay attention to that. And one more place to go. Bring it back inside and listen to what you hear inside yourself. Inside yourself. Okay. So you took a little trip. Thank you for trusting me with your directions. And so I'll open it up just for a moment to ask you, what did you discover? What did you notice in any of the places?
Outside is noisy.
Outside is noisy. Anybody else?
Quiet.
It's quiet in here. Uh-huh. Anything else?
It's a hum from the air conditioner.
There's a hum, that's right. You didn't hear that before until you focus it, right? Focus your hearing, yeah.
There are little incidental sounds that I just, ignore.
Uh-huh. Normally.
Yeah.
Right.
When I was listening,
Uh-huh.
in the room, I heard little things like a creak, but I have my hearing aids on, so everything is magnified.
It's magnified. Well, so this is a good opportunity for you to do that. Anybody else? What happened when you went, yeah.
Your fingers were going like this
Mm-hmm.
on the wood.
Mm-hmm. So you heard, what happened, yeah.
The internal signs, things I hear, I tend to ignore.
You tend to ignore the things that you hear inside. So anybody aware of noise inside? Words or thoughts or whatever when you go inside? Yeah, right. So that noise inside your head is what I call your cranial woodpecker. It's constantly going. We have talk going inside our heads most of the time. We're not even aware of it. So think about this. If we have talking, and if you focus your listening to hear, then you tune out other stuff, right? You followed my suggestions. Then if you go outside there, you ignore what's here, right? And then when you go inside here, you hopefully ignore all the rest. So the idea is when you focus your listening, you can hear more than you normally would. Like you're saying, Lois, you hear more than you normally be paying attention to. Imagine using that kind of focus when you're speaking with somebody else. Then I'm going to tune the noise down in my head, that cranial woodpecker, and be totally available to whomever is speaking with me at the time. That's back to the gift that we can give to people. But it's impossible to listen to somebody else when there's noise in our heads. Scientifically, physiologically, impossible to hear internal noise and external noise. Did you know that if you wanted to do a term paper or write an important letter or concentrate on the language that you're involved with, you cannot also simultaneously listen to the opera? One has to fade back from the other. Right? In other words, if you think about a stage, it has to go backstage, the opera, while you're working on this document or reading the New York Times, and vice versa. You can do you can listen to the opera or whatever music you listen to, and you can't read the paper. And you say, yes, you can, and I'm suggesting you cannot. They go back and forth. One is always, because you can't have two systems going in auditorially at the same time. It'll cancel them out. So with the kids who, for example, put music on when they do homework, that they're not singing the song and writing their essay. They're either singing the song or writing the essay, or it's background noise. It's just comfort. It functions different ways. But physiologically, you can't do it. The reason I say this to you is because when you're communicating with somebody else and you've got noise in your head, and there are all kinds of noises, hidden agendas, judgments, evaluations, I'm better than you are, what a stupid thing to say, I can't believe you're saying it, when can I get out of here, when will he shut up, and other things that ethical people obviously don't do, but we fall into the traps once in a while. So the idea of paying attention to the fact that we have noises in our heads, and not in a mental disease way, but the fact that we do this, if we can kind of harness them and quiet them down and be present to somebody else, what a gift. Yeah.
Well, is it permissible to ask a question or make a
Sure.
at this point?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not. You want to wait till or?
Wait till the end, but it has to do with what you're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. This listening to someone else, you come to with baggage. How do you feel about that person? If you're talking to your wife, it's one thing. If you're talking to a friend that you like, it's another thing. If you're talking to someone you don't like, it's another thing. So the emotion does affect.
Well, yes, and we're going to talk about the obstacles of the emotional impact of, oh, here comes Harry again. I know it's going to be that kind of conversation. Yeah, I think that's true. I know it's true. But I remember years ago, I was a writer for the New York Post, and I wrote a weekly column on career management. And I actually, way before I got involved with theater, I interviewed somebody who was involved in theater. And I asked the question, how do you do this every day and every night and all the rest and keep it fresh? Like, isn't it boring? Like, oh, here we go, another scene again. You know, how do you do that? This is a bazillion years ago. And I remember what he said. He said, every time I'm with my scene partner, I pay attention to how that person is in that moment. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, if she looks tired, then I'm going to speak to her tiredness. If she didn't sleep well last night and she looks like really kind of tired, I'm going to speak to that same words, but I'm going to speak with an intention of honoring that tiredness. And if she's really peppy and sparky and full of vinegar, I'm going to speak to that. And that's how it keeps it fresh every day. Because I never know who's going to be in front of me. Even though the roles are cast, the words are there, people are changing and they're different every single day. I said to myself, oh my God, you know, the corporate coaching that I do, I say to people, you know, if you assume that he's going to be X, Y, Z all the time, how are you going to behave? You're cast and cut in this role forever. There's no room for curiosity. I wonder if today might be just a little different. I wonder if I listen differently to this person. A little bit more fully, a little bit more richly, a little bit what I call under the line. Picture a line, like the earth. Here's the earth. And here's the earth down, and here's the sky up. And think about words being on the surface, but the roots, okay, are emotions, thoughts, concerns, feelings, or whatever. So what you hear on top is where the arguments occur. You said, yes, but, blah, 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 blah. You reflect down on an emotional thing, it sounds to me like you're really scared. Or it sounds to me like you're really frustrated. They didn't say those words, these people who, you know, manifest this, but their behaviors did. So you kind of can answer what I call below the line. And it's amazing how people feel recognized when we do that. So yes, our biases are in the way. First thing to do is be attentive to what the biases are. What are they? And get curious. I wonder what would happen if. You know, that SOB that I have to talk to all the time? I wonder what happened if I changed my viewpoint one moment to see what happens. I don't know. You never know. There's an old saying that, you know, the meaning of your communication is the response you get. The meaning of your communication is the response you get. So if you're not getting the right response, you can either blame the other guy over whom you have no control, or you can shift your own pattern and try something new. And there are obstacles outside too, right? A poor environment, a toxic environment, on the run. You know, if somebody calls you and you've got a whole bunch of things going on. Do you have people, and don't have to raise your hand, people in your life who call you when you're really, really busy, and they talk to you as if you have all the time in the world, and they tell you all their things and all their needs and all their problems, and they don't say, hey, Noah, have you got time to talk now? How many people say, is this a good time to talk? I love that when people do that, because then I can either say yes or no and then attend to whatever we need to attend to now or then. But a lot of people don't. Well, we can't control other people. But what can we do ourselves? What would happen if the next week, every time you got on the phone with somebody, you said to them, is this a good time to talk? Huh? And what might that feel like on the other side when somebody asks you that, or you ask them that? Nice little shift to try. Can't hurt. It's like chicken soup. Couldn't hurt, right? Okay. Also, you know, there are blockades to listening if there are people who speak from different cultures and different accents. I remember once working with a man from India who was convinced that people didn't like him because he was from India. It's just they didn't understand him. He spoke so quickly, all right, that they tune him out, and they were too afraid to say, would you slow it down? I really want to know what you're saying. However, you speak faster than I do, so could you just slow it down? And he started slowing it down. He found out that people liked him a whole lot because they understood him. So it's a matter of how we decide how we want to approach it. What's also interesting is the best way to listen is based on the circumstance. Best way to listen. There's no one right way of listening. So I want to explain to you, if you think about 5 different types of listening, instead of it being active or non-active or passive or whatever, there really are a number of listening ways along a continuum that you might be curious about. And by the way, I had these little cards. I had them left over, so I'm going to give everybody a listening reminder cards. It's kind of a fun thing. I had them on the shelf, so I grabbed them. There's a kind of listening that is just to enjoy. You go to a show. You go to a comedy club. Somebody brings you great news, right? You don't have to do anything. You just have to be there to receive it, right? And it's called appreciative listening. You just appreciate whatever's going on. It's usually a good news kind of thing, and it doesn't require any action. The next, and that's a feeling category, and these are facts. Moving here, it's no longer just hanging out and enjoying it. It's, well, somebody's got a little bit of a concern. So it's the kind of listening where it requires a little bit of sensitivity and empathy. Actually, it's called empathic listening. And empathic listening is not about fixing something for somebody, but it's to support somebody else's concerns. I understand you're concerned about the cost of clothing right now. And so what are some of the things that you're thinking about doing? All right, so I'm not going to say you should go here, you should go to this store, but rather pull it back to somebody else and support their concerns, not fix it. So that's still the feeling stuff, right? I understand your feelings, I'm happy for you, blah, blah, blah. At some point, it kind of divides and it goes over into facts. And so there's a way of listening that I call gist listening for the gist of things. What's the gestalt of what that person's saying? All right, I want to hear what she's saying, and I want to associate it to something I already know, but it's a little bit different. And it's the big picture listener, and it's the person who listens to it quickly and then checks out. They get it quickly, like they're fast studies, but they don't always stay. The people who stay are the people who listen for all the details and all the facts and all the information. It goes now to the end, which is what we call evaluative listening. And that is, what do we do? What do we do? All right. So evaluative listening probably would be a form of listening and discerning listening that you'd use for a political candidate. All right, I want to hear all the details. I want to see what I want to do as far as voting is concerned. All right, if somebody, God forbid, is calling you in an emergency, you don't say, "Oh, you poor dear." You say, "I'm taking you to the emergency room right now." We're not going to go into a whole long harangue about stuff. All right, but on the other hand, if somebody's struggling with some stuff, you might just want to be that gift to that person and be one of those listeners who just allow them to do it. Because sometimes if you leave people alone and let them talk, surprisingly what happens is they fix it themselves. It's amazing. If you give people enough time to think, sometimes, often, they find their own solutions. And it's quite magical. And it's quite meaningful for those people. So making a decision is way at the end, and what do you do? And over here, it's just to enjoy. And then there are places and spaces in between. So a couple of suggestions going forward on how to give the gift of listening to people. One of them is to get rid of the response that we often use called yes, but. All right? Because when we say yes, but acts like a verbal eraser. It basically says to the other person, whatever you said before the but doesn't count. What it does, it makes people feel cut off at the knees. And your stuff that you're saying is more important. If you want to make a difference in lives of people, and particularly when you're disagreeing, my suggestion is to say yes and. And yes doesn't mean I agree with you. Yes means I'm listening. Yes, I understand what you're saying. And here's my viewpoint. Because and is a link between that person and this person, and everybody stands up tall. Where when you say yes, but, it's like, lay down, I count. Another way to do it is to listen to somebody and not say anything. In workshops, sometimes what I do is I have people partner up with one another and they talk to each other, and I say the listener can't say a word. You have to see people gritting their teeth and shaking their legs and going into, kind of like little hysterias because they can't say anything. But the person who was speaking loved it. The person who was speaking said, wow, good, somebody's listening to me. So it's kind of an amazing thing to be able to just stay silent. Sometimes it's nice just to say, and, if somebody's saying something of importance and interesting. Also, what's also effective, and I have found this to be so, is if you find out that somebody speaks in picture terms, visual terms. We got to look at this clearly. It's a little foggy to me. I don't have the whole picture. This has to clear up. All right. If you speak to them back in those terms, they are going to feel like you understand them beyond belief. My daughter, who is very visual, my older daughter, speaks in terms of when she was dating, what her boyfriends looked like. Everything was always visual, all right? And I would say to her, well, it sounds like you feel like, you feel, not visual. It sounds like you're feeling really excited. And she'd say to me, what do you talk about feelings? He's good looking, all right? So some people talk in feeling words. All right? They talk about, I'm in the grip of something. All right? I feel like I can't fight my way out. Or I'm flying high. And anything that's kind of a physical thing. And it's a physical thing. If you speak back in those terms, people feel understood. And then the auditory stuff, I had an assistant once who was highly auditory. He listened that way, and he never took notes when I asked him to do things in the office. And I'd say to him, I said, Ron, you're not writing anything down. He says, have you ever seen a bartender write anything down? I said, no. He said, because they're totally auditory. And they listen through their ears, and they get it all through their ears. And by God, they do. Seriously, have you ever seen a bartender write your order down at a bar? Never. Hardly ever. So the idea is there are lots of ways to listen. There are different circumstances. When it calls for action, you act. When it doesn't call for action, and the way to do it is to get the signal from somebody else. They talk about that male-female thing, when a woman is speaking. I hate to do this sexist, but the research shows that women like to process stuff out a little bit more than men generally. So the idea is men tend to want to fix it. Where is it? Where can I kill it and bring it home? Kind of straight out, right? And the women are just happy just to express themselves, and they don't want to get fixed. They don't want it solved right away. They just want to have a chance to maybe think out loud or run around with possibilities or whatever. So if that person wants that, if you're running to fix it, whom are you taking care of? If you're not on their wavelength and you're on your own, whom are you taking care of? I think you're taking care of yourself. And you're really not taking care of somebody else. So it's kind of interesting to think about when you're listening. So I have in a couple of things here. Henry Kissinger was noted to be, who Henry Kissinger was, and his negotiations with great big countries who often were disagreeing with one another has been noted to be this kind of negotiator. He would make sure that both parties could describe to the opposing party what the opposing party was upset about to the satisfaction of the opposing party, and vice versa before negotiations even started. So if Alice and I were disagreeing and Joan were Kissinger, she would say, Alice, tell Judy, okay, what Judy's upset about, all right? And only when Judy would nod her head and say, yeah, that's what's upsetting me. And then Joan says to me, tell me what Alice, tell Alice what she's upset about. And when I get Alice going with that old bobblehead, you know, the thing in the back of the trunk of the car, it goes like this, then Joan would say, okay, now we negotiate. But so many times we assume we understand one another, and we don't. And remember when I said to you in the beginning, listening is a lot of work? It's really hard work. So we want to think about how we can do that. Felix Adler said that love is the expansion of two natures in such fashion that each include the other, and each is enriched by the other. And I have a little thing now that I have to read because I have not memorized this. So forgive me if I read in summation of this or closing of this little presentation. It's called Please Hear What I'm Not Saying. Don't be fooled by me. Don't be fooled by the face that I wear, for I wear a mask. I wear 1,000 masks. Masks that I'm afraid to take off, and none of them are me. Pretending is an art that's second nature to me, but don't be fooled, for God's sakes, don't be fooled. I give you the impression that I'm secure, all is sunny, unruffled with me, within me as well as without. The confidence is my name, and coolness is my game, and that the water is calm, and I'm in command, and that I need no one. But don't believe me. Please. My surface may seem smooth, but my surface is my mask. My ever-wearying, ever-concealing mask. Beneath lies no smugness, no complacence. Beneath dwells the real me in confusion, in fear, in aloneness. But I hide this. I don't want anybody to know it. I panic at the thought of my weakness and fear being exposed. That's why I frantically create a mask to hide behind a nonchalant, sophisticated facade to help me pretend, to shield me from the glance that knows. But such a glance is precisely my salvation. My only salvation, and I know it. That is, if it's followed by acceptance, if it's followed by love. It's the only thing that liberates me from myself, from my own self-built prison walls, from barriers that I so painstakingly erect. It's the only thing that will assure me of what I can't assure myself, that I'm really worth something. But I don't tell you this. I don't dare. I'm afraid. I'm afraid you'll think less of me and that you'll laugh and your laugh would kill me. And I'm afraid that deep down I'm nothing and that I'm just no good and that you'll see this and reject me. So I play the game, my desperate pretending game, with a facade of assurance without, and a trembling child within. And so begins the parade of masks. And my life becomes a front. I idly chatter with you in the suave tones of surface talk. I tell you everything that is really nothing, and nothing of what is everything, of what is crying within me. So when I'm going through my routine, do not be fooled by what I am saying. Please listen carefully and try to hear what I'm not saying, what I'd like to be able to say. For what survival I need to say, but I can't say. I dislike hiding. Honestly, I dislike the superficial game I'm playing, the superficial phony game. I'd like to be genuine and spontaneous in me, but you've got to help me. You've got to hold out your hand even when that's the last thing I seem to want or need. Only you can wipe away from my eye the blank stare of the breathing dead. Only you can call me into aliveness. Each time you're kind and gentle and encouraging, each time you try to understand because you really care, my heart begins to grow wings, very feeble wings, but wings. With your sensitivity and empathy and your power to understanding, you can breathe life into me. I want you to know that. I want you to know how important you are to me, how you can be a co-creator of the person that is me, if you choose to. Please choose to. You alone can break down the wall which I tremble. behind it, I tremble. You alone can release me from my shadow world of panic and uncertainty, from my lonely prison. So do not pass me by. It will not be easy for you. A long conviction of worthlessness brings strong walls. They build strong walls. The nearer you approach me, the blinder I strike back. I fight against the very thing I cry out for. But I'm told that love is stronger than walls, and in this lies my hope, my only hope. Please try to beat down those walls with firm hands but gentle hands, for a child is very sensitive. Who am I, you may wonder? I'm someone you know very well, for I am every man and every woman you meet. Author unknown. Good morning.